Good morning, everyone. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Why Email Marketers Will Inherit the Marketing Landscape. Before we jump in, I wanted to call attention to the Questions tab on your screen. Please feel free to use this feature throughout the presentation, and we will address as many questions as we can at the end. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's presenter, Adam Corey, who is Vice President of Marketing at Tealium. For those of you who aren't familiar, Tealium is a leader in real-time customer data solutions and enterprise tag management. Tealium's customer data platform, which includes tag management, an omni-channel segmentation and action engine, and a suite of data services, powers the ability to build unified customer profiles in real time and drive better omni-channel customer experiences. Adam Corey leads Tealium's marketing and partnership efforts and is responsible for driving awareness around the power of Tealium and building alliances with best-of-breed customer data solutions. He has over 13 years of experience in digital analytics, marketing, and business development. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Adam.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. As I know you're likely in the middle of a busy end of the year, and for some of you, perhaps a holiday shopping season that you're supporting as well. So as we begin today's presentation, really wanted to start off with why we're here today. And as you notice from the title of today's presentation, we're really talking about what the email marketer's role really is in the wider marketing landscape. As we all know here, email consistently ranks as one of the most strategic channels and the most important channels from driving conversions and other objectives throughout the marketing organization. In a recent study that we did, actually just a few weeks ago with Tech Validate, we asked marketers like yourselves across all different size organizations and spanning many different types of verticals, what specific channels they were relying on most this time of year. And across pretty much every segment, email was the number one most important channel that they were relying on. And I think it makes no sense, as email has really been the slow and steady workhorse of the marketing organization. And if we look at the ROI numbers, consistently provides a very strong ROI, upwards of 40x when you actually look at dollar in versus dollar out. So as we think about what happens outside of the marketing landscape, this is where things get quite interesting. If we go back about 4 or 5 years and look at Scott Brinker's Chief MarTech landscape for all the different parts of the ecosystem that make up today's modern marketing organization, there are lots of different solutions that are there. And as each year has progressed, the number of solutions has really increased. And so as we look into 2014, into 2015 and beyond, this has really become not just a look at or a survey of the industry landscape, but it really seems like more of an eye exam or a Where's Waldo, where it's very difficult to even find the vendors that you use in this very large ecosystem. And that's really, I think, symptomatic of a wider shift in customer behavior and just the explosion of the channels that really exist out there. If we look inward at our own organizations, we actually find that most of us are using lots of different technology vendors to make up what is really our customer experience from a marketing and communication standpoint. Looking across, again, a similar study that we did with eConsultancy this year, the number of just marketing technology vendors that are used in one particular company or on one particular site, half of us have at least 21 of these vendors, and about a third are actually using more than 30 of these technologies. And I encourage you to take a look at what your own makeup really looks like, because quite honestly, you'll see just an explosion of technologies that span not just individual analytics or email solutions and tracking tags, but you'll see everything from A/B split testing and analytics, affiliate marketing, chat technologies, etc. All of these things make up a different part of the customer experience. But as a result, since they don't necessarily speak with one another, they each have their own fragmented profile. So as each one of these has their own piece of the puzzle, it's really difficult to understand the full picture of who an end person truly is and what makes them tick, or to be punny here for a moment at the end of the year, what makes them click. So at the same time that our own internal complexity has increased and we use more and more technologies to uncover and build a customer experience and look at what works, if we switch over and put our customer hats on for a moment, the way in which we interact with our brands or interact with sites or companies that we care about has really evolved over the last few years as well. A study that came out last year from an agency in the UK, OMD, found that in the evening, consumers are shifting devices. And so that means between perhaps their laptop computer, their mobile phone, or a tablet or other devices, they're shifting their devices upwards of 21 times per hour. And when you think about this, first off, it sounds absolutely insane and almost not believable. But then I will ask you to make a reminder on your phone to go home tonight, and when you're sitting in front of the computer and getting those last few emails out for work, set the timer and look for an hour about the number of times that you perhaps switch devices. And if we think, too, on top of that, the increasing number of devices that have actually increased for an individual user. Right now, I'm about 2 feet away from my mobile phone. I have an Apple Watch strapped to my wrist, and I go home to have a television that's connected to the internet and has apps. So it's really not that difficult to think about the number of ways a person can interact with a brand. And no surprise that our attention span as individuals has really decreased. Funny studies that have come out over the last year or so that really find that, sadly, we now have a shorter attention span than our pet goldfish. This was not the case in 2000. We were actually a little bit more focused than our goldfish, but that has slipped away a little bit. And as we think about also wider customer behaviors, if you've been watching a lot of the industry buzz, especially in the ad tech landscape, one of the increasing concerns that exists out there is ad avoidance, or folks that are looking to opt out or avoid or don't click or don't participate in traditional online advertising. A recent study this year found that close to 200 million active users use some sort of ad avoidance technology. And this creates a real set of difficulties in that large landscape that may increasingly rely on ad technologies and other technologies. So what's funny though, and if we think about all things are a cycle, email has really been at the forefront of this really since its inception. If you think about email was confronting the new frontier of mobile well before most of us even had mobile apps or phones that were capable of that. Email marketers here on the phone today actually had to think about how is my message being understood or communicated when it's viewed in different form factors. How is it different when someone has a full version of my email that they open up versus a much smaller version or maybe a text-only version of that? And perhaps with different email clients, how does a long subject line work traditionally well on a desktop experience, then translate when someone looks at this on their phone? I need to obviously consider a shortening or an optimization of that top of the header or email text that I have in my subject line. The attention span that everyone's just coming to terms with as we have lots more devices, again, not breaking news to today's email marketers. They've had to battle a 2 to 3 second attention span when it comes to subject line, and a 10 to 20 second perhaps attention span when it comes to scanning the actual body when they open the actual email itself. And then as we think about ad avoidance, when I look at more and more folks, considering the larger implications or concerns over advertising, what it really says to me is that advertising has increasingly become, or unfortunately become for many customers, a one-way street where a message is just pushed out to a consumer and there's no real conversation. And if we look at what email marketers have really done over the last several years, is they've had to understand the balance of the give and take. If an end consumer is going to share their personal information with you or opt into communication, they're really looking to make sure that there's value associated with that you're going to respect their customer data that they've shared with you, you're going to respect the amount of time and the ways in which you communicate, and you're going to provide value when you do choose to reach out to them. Otherwise, again, as email marketers, we know we run the risk of actually losing them altogether because they can click that unsubscribe, and then it's very difficult to get them back in. So as all of these trends have really increased in noise and their visibility across the entire marketing technology landscape, for today's email marketer, a lot of it's not really news. We've really been confronting and dealing with this in many ways for the last 10 to 15 years. So as we talk about really the state of where we are today, let's talk a bit about this concept of omni-channel marketing and the shift that more and more of our organizations are actually looking to embrace. So the idea behind omni-channel marketing is really to have one cohesive view or one profile of an individual that spans really every place that I might be interacting. And if we think about this is really underscoring the importance of knowing your audience, and this is really imperative to make omni-channel marketing truly work. If we think about the definition for a moment of omnichannel marketing, it's really about creating a seamless user experience. So it's not just about making sure that I have the same profile and the same message sent across all channels and all devices, but it's making sure that our consumers don't have to start over and reintroduce themselves as they move from channel to channel. So to make this happen, though, I as a brand or a company needs to understand at every turn who you are, what motivates you, and I can't just silo that into one individual channel. And I think if you, again, think about later on today when you put on your consumer hat again, think about the ways in which you interact with a brand and how you really don't see the delineation between different channels the same way that organizationally inside that company, those channels are very different, served by very different technologies and very different teams. I think to my own life, and when I've had experiences with airlines recently, instead of taking to a website or picking up the phone, I turn to Twitter. So I've sadly become one of those people that will go ahead and go to Twitter for my customer support needs. But I don't actually view there being a difference between each of these individual channels. I'm going to use the channel that works best for me in that moment and that I believe will give me the best result in the quickest or shortest amount of time. So as omnichannel really becomes the goal of a lot of our organizations, and we look around us at other people in our industry that either compete with us or are leading the way in some examples, we look at omnichannel marketing as a way to fuel growth. And to be able to do this, we need to think about how our companies can collect the right information about how my visitors or how my customers are interacting with us. So all those little pieces of data that exist as someone opens an email, clicks through an email, reads certain pieces of content, purchases something, I need to be able to pick up and listen for that information. And I can't silo that information by certain channels because if I do, I'm therefore introducing some blind spots throughout my customer experience. But I don't need to just collect this information. I need to be able to act on this information and make this information readily available in real time at every point, so that as that airline passenger chooses to go from phone to, in the airport to on his mobile phone and into Twitter, the same understanding of who he is needs to pervade each one of those channels. And having a total ownership and respect for this data along the way is what is ultimately important to be able to build and optimize along the way for an organization. So again, getting back to why we're here today and where email marketers really fit into this, I think it's important to think about where some of the skills and traits that exist with today's email marketers really exist. And let's draw some parallels to how those are important with building a platform for customer data within the wider organization, not just within the email channel. So if we think about today's email marketers, they have experience with handling and leveraging customer data, not just handling and working with it, but also respecting how you collect this information and how you leverage it in a way that's appropriate to consumers. You have an ability to look beyond just one goal and think about the wider customer path and customer journey and relationship. It's not about sending out one message and having someone meet one goal, but it's part of a larger conversation that happens with consumers that gets them information, gets them support, and gets them nurtured along the way, not just into one individual conversion, but focused on the wider goals of retention and engagement. And then finally, looking at how cross-channel campaigns that are driven via the email channel really increase conversions, but also allow us to combat some of the things that as email marketers we face, such as email fatigue. So let's drill in a little bit here. So into one of the first traits, we talk a little bit about turning data into action. So if we think about what email marketers, again, it's retro now, thinking what email marketers have done for a long time, it's really focus on data quality. What am I doing to make sure that my database is clean, has the right data in it? If I have any holes in that data, what can I do to make sure that that data is appropriate and merge with other data sets that may have additional things that might provide value, be it transaction data or other behavioral data, so that I can create not just a great database, but I can create increasingly relevant campaigns that I'm using key performance indicators to ensure that this is working along the way. And again, not just key performance indicators that show, yep, my open rate, my click-through is great, but I'm actually getting this email opened up, am I making sure that I'm providing value and therefore falling below my threshold of acceptable unsubscribes, potentially as another key performance indicator. The industry as a whole, outside of just email, is finding that first-party data, what you know about somebody, is really becoming more and more important compared to third-party data, what other people might know or what other people might infer about you. You can search on the web for concepts of people first in the ad space, and this is again a new term in a lot of ways to those outside of the email world, but leveraging other customer data that you have to fuel digital advertising or other experiences. If you think about what's happened in the ad space over the last 5 years or so, the concept of retargeting has been one of the most popular things within the marketing organization. I take what someone has done in a web experience, maybe looked at a product and didn't buy it, and I find them out there in the wild and I retarget them with an ad for that product. That basic definition of that basic example is really what email marketers have been doing for quite some time with cart abandonment and conversion abandonment campaigns that have been run, but often with even more data tied to that since I have a large, clean, great database, how do I reach out to people based on their previous spending behavior? When do I reach out to people based on time of day that they like to shop? All the other information that I may have. Email marketers are sitting in a great spot to be able to turn not just one dimension of data, but really a multi-faceted set of data into a cohesive set of campaigns. And this leads us to the importance of, again, it's not just one goal, but it's really thinking through the entire life cycle. If I was just focused on one channel and one goal, sure, that's great, but who has that luxury or who has a site that's built around that? We really have to think about all the different ways in which my customers are interacting and how I keep the conversation going between those conversions. For someone who's a B2B or a considered purchase consumer site that may have a really long lead time, I can't send out an email and say, hey, come and buy our technologies today, but I want to continually provide value and move the conversation forward so that I can ultimately drive someone into that conversion funnel there. So nurturing, again, not a surprise that the rest of the industry is catching on to the idea of how do I keep the conversation going beyond just asking someone to come and convert. Because again, not everyone's going to convert every week, but if I have a way to engage them and keep them engaged with various messages, I want to make sure that I do so, but I need to look at a more diverse and a longer term approach to engagement. Ad technologies are also looking to see where this is possible to make sure that they can look at different parts of the funnel and find what are the right messages that I can present in front of the customer at this time to drive them one step deeper. And finally, thinking about another area that works from the email marketer's perspective is looking at where cross-channel messages or cross-channel campaigns that are driven from email truly work today. So a Facebook study that actually came out about a year ago, I think is one of the most crystallized examples of where this is powerful. And what they did is they worked with one particular retailer out there and looked at a customer set of about 1 million people and looked at a couple different groups to see ones that they sent just an email to with a message on its own, one that they just put into a Facebook ad, and then another where consumers actually received both. And again, this is based on a known data set of first-party data, what you know about based on your previous customer relationships. And they found that those who actually received both the email itself and a corresponding ad on Facebook in the newsfeed that had the same message, actually had a 22% increase in conversion rates. And that's a great number just on its own. 22% is something that we'd all love to see from our campaigns as a boost. But if we think about it, it makes perfect sense. If I send an email to somebody and they're in the middle of their morning, maybe they look at it and hopefully read through it and scan through it. But then if they don't take action on it, to have a reinforcing message that happens throughout the day on Facebook then gives me a wider chance to be able to convert somebody into that click. At the same time, this gives me an ability as an email marketer to look beyond my limitations from just that one channel, where I can't keep sending someone an email until they click. Gosh, wouldn't that be great? If I could just go ahead and keep sending you an email, that would immediately lead to an unsubscribe. That's really list fatigue and email fatigue. Being able to broaden my message to more channels gives me an ability to engage someone at the time that they're ready to, and really in the channel that they're in. But this is obviously just one integration, and we're not all just on email and Facebook. We have a much wider set of needs throughout the customer experience. So this is where broadening this particular tactic really becomes important. So thinking about this and looking across what we've talked about so far, customers don't really see one particular way that they interact with you as being different from another. And as customers are really shifting between, and our organizations are really trying to be more and more customer obsessed or customer centric, building a true foundation or a unified approach to working with customer data that's not siloed in or dependent on just one channel really becomes key. If we go back to the example that we just talked about a moment ago with Facebook and email, think about what that actually means from a tactical, number of seconds or minutes that you have in front of a consumer. If I have just seconds for someone in that subject line, or if they read through my email at maybe a little bit longer window of opportunity, but I only have that opportunity once a day or a couple times a week or once a week depending on what my rules are for that particular audience, that's a limited opportunity, an important opportunity, and as we've seen, a successful opportunity for me to engage somebody. But if I can hedge my bet, if you will, by looking and coordinating Facebook or other display channels or other social networks, this becomes really interesting. If you look at the chart on the right here, I have for, let's say, my target audience of 30 to 44-year-olds, 49.2 minutes spent on average a day in the Facebook channel compared to maybe a limited amount of time that I may have to tell a story in just email. And if I think about using both of these together, I therefore have an ability to engage someone far beyond just one channel, and if they happen to be spending more of their time in one, I can make sure to get them there. So this really all starts with data. When we think about how do I create this, how do I instill this type of a practice inside my organization, we have to start with data. So let's go back and think about that slide that we started with. My understanding in today's typical implementation of technologies on a website is usually limited to what I see within one particular silo, one particular channel. But your understanding, or the email marketer's understanding of what a consumer is all about, their profile, their history, transactions, etc., can really be used to inform all of these other channels within the wider marketing organization and customer insights group as the first step into building a unified customer identity. And this is really what we think of as really the concept of a data supply chain, if you will. And while we won't dive too much into this, I think it's important to just think about the shift here in the concept of a data supply chain. That implementations or tracking or getting information about an end consumer is not one-off. It's not an individual implementation. It's not putting a tracking pixel on this page or making sure my email database is great while my other databases maybe don't exist or are lacking. But really a holistic approach that makes sure that we look at every turn and takes into consideration what consumers are doing in real time. Remember, our customers don't really care about the channel that they're interacting on. They don't see the same limitations or struggles or implementation requirements that are required to create a seamless experience. So why should their ultimate experience with you be impacted or limited? So this is an emerging concept that we're seeing in the industry called a customer data platform, which is really the intersection of your technology stack, those 20, 30 plus technologies that you may be using across different parts of your website or mobile experience, and the action that you want to take across those channels to engage the consumer. They all share a common need of customer data. And if you think back to that Facebook example from a moment ago, if I wasn't able to share a common understanding, a common language between two channels, I wouldn't be able to actually see or coordinate those messages between social and email. So having a common understanding of who the customer is and what that customer data is all about really becomes key to creating these seamless, holistic experiences. So where to start as an email marketer within the organization or someone focused on data within the organization? I think the first step is really to identify where your company is in their evolution of customer data management. A great report from eConsultancy, also out this year, really found that very few of us have a single platform that manages our data across all of the channels that we work with. In fact, just 8% of folks. Some were at some point along the way, but that really means that 92% of us still have a ways to go. We can also look at how your experience inside of email can really be used as a framework for customer data within the wider organization. If we think about, again, those that sit around us in different parts of the org that don't, because of the nature of their channel, don't have the same level of experience with working with customer data, really what can we use from email to help educate and inform those around us with what we've learned? What is a particular email to a particular segment over time that we've learned, how that motivates or doesn't motivate a particular segment? How could that potentially be used to help other channels? Is there elements of that are applicable within in-store experiences or within the way that I design my website or the way that I engage people via social? If we think of the macro need to create a conversation, email is really one of the best ways to drive that conversation. This then allows us to build cross-channel cooperation. So if I educate, share my best practices so that can help other parts of the organization, that will ultimately lead to a better working relationship so that I can get the social team to work with my team to coordinate data and campaigns together. And this as a wider organization really allows me to identify a framework for building my customer data supply chain via that customer data platform concept that we talked about. There are a couple resources that I want to share with you that I think are really important as organizations are starting to think about their evolution. The first is from Forrester Research, which is about creating a blueprint for your marketing technology. The other is from Rob Associates, which is focused on the concept of a customer data platform, really pioneering that concept. And in this paper, making the case for the real-time customer data platform, as well as an offer from Telium around having an assessment of your own customer data and your evolution of working with that data throughout your stack. And with that, we'll open it up to questions that we have in from the audience.
Great. All right, it looks like we have time for one question, so Adam, I'll go ahead and throw this one out for you. You mentioned real-time, obviously a number of times throughout the presentation. How does that apply to an email program, which is typically built on a more scheduled batch process?
Yeah, I mean, I think no two email strategies are alike, and some maybe focus a bit more on schedules or batches, and some are based on real-time triggers. So they really can span throughout. I think when we talk about real-time customer data, I think our biggest goal is to think about making data available in real time. It doesn't mean that any one part of the organization needs to act on that information in real time necessarily, but they need the ability to act. So for some of us, it may be if I have a data supply chain that touches all channels, and I might traditionally have sent a trigger to my email system to say, hey, send an email because this person didn't purchase. And then I look over in another channel and find, oh, you know what, in the mobile channel, they did actually purchase, so I'd want to suppress them from sending that email. Being able to have a real-time communication infrastructure between all of my channels gives me the ability to make sure that I either do or do not engage person with messages that are either important to them or maybe out of date.
Perfect. That will go ahead and wrap up the presentation for today. We'd like to thank all of you for joining, and please do look for a follow-up communication from Telium with those resources that Adam mentioned. Have a great day.